The Vivo X300 Pro is not only an amazing camera phone that uses the famous Zeiss coating on its large camera bump and huge telephoto sensor, but it also has a big battery on its back. So naturally, I decided to compare it to the iPhone 17 Pro Max to see if it can take better pictures and also if the battery life lasts longer. And I bought both phones with my own money. I'll start with the camera comparison because I know most of you are here to see that. Starting with the main lens, the Vivo and iPhone main sensors are the same size, but the Vivo has an f1.6 aperture instead of f1.8, therefore you get a slightly more light. In practical terms, you can also see that the Vivo has a little bit more background blur or bokeh because of that, but the main difference is in color science. I'm taking photos with Zeiss natural mode, and in this mode at least the Vivo has a bit more of a magenta tint, while the iPhone leans towards green. That makes the skin tone slightly more lively on the Vivo, and the colors are also a bit more vivid. Also, if you look at the Chili the dog, his white is whiter on the Vivo than the iPhone. For indoor shots and Tanya's skin tone, the Vivo is warmer, and the iPhone makes her colder and more contrasty. The same goes for my skin tone. I'm darker on the iPhone and a bit more orange on the Vivo, and I can tell you the reality is something in between. For Chili the dog's skin tone, I feel the iPhone is nailing the color better. Yes, the white balance leans a bit too much into green, but the exposure and overall picture looks nicer on the iPhone. You can also use portrait mode, and I honestly prefer the shots on the Vivo. Yes, the skin is a bit smoother, but that's what I personally prefer when I take portrait shots. I don't like too much contrast. You can also use filters on both phones. For iPhone, the filters are more about undertones and slight color changes, but for Vivo, you have these filmic looks that remind me of Fujifilm cameras, and I really dig it. The magic of the Vivo X300 Pro is more in the telephoto lens, where it uses a much larger sensor than the iPhone. It is also a 200 megapixel one instead of 48 megapixel. It is an 85mm lens instead of 100mm on the iPhone, and 85mm is my favorite focal length for portrait shots. If you look at this picture, you will notice that the background blur or bokeh on the Vivo is stronger, making the photo look more professional. But more importantly, the better sensor also lets the phone produce better colors. I can assure you Maria's hair is not gray like in the photo on the iPhone, and her face is not that pale. For moving pets and kids, the Vivo is doing a better job too. Again, the larger sensor lets the phone capture moments with a higher shutter speed, which helps freeze the motion better. If you zoom further with the phones, the Vivo also seems to use some new Gen AI algorithms because the face looks really smooth, but I'm not complaining as long as the photo looks better. If you zoom really far, the Vivo is definitely using Gen AI to reconstruct lost information, something that Pixel phones also do these days. You can also take macro shots with the telephoto lens on the Vivo. You can technically do the same on the iPhone, but the result is not even close. You can also use the ultrawide camera for macro shots, and I do find the Vivo nailing highlights better here. For daylight photos with the ultrawide lens, the difference is more in color science, where the Vivo makes the sky more vibrant, again in Zeiss natural mode, but on the other hand, I find the Vivo doing better body proportions corrections. As you can see in this shot, the iPhone photo looks unnatural. And talking about colors in general, Vivo's colors are more vivid even if you don't use the vivid mode, but they are also more accurate, like in this photo. The iPhone looks so dull and the white balance is completely wrong, whereas the Vivo nailed the autumn vibe. Or in this shot, the iPhone's colors are just wrong again, and it doesn't only look bad but also inaccurate. I think Chinese phones usually get a bad rep for artificial colors, but in my experience, at least Vivo is producing better colors than the iPhone. One thing that the iPhone does better though is selfies for sure. The camera simply produces better results. Also, the selfie camera on the iPhone is a square, so you can take both horizontal and vertical photos. For night and low light photos, I took this photo in almost absolute darkness. The Vivo is producing a better result even with a shutter speed of 1/6 of a second of the main lens, and of course with the telephoto lens, it is not even a comparison. The Vivo photo is head and shoulders above the iPhone. For videos, the game changes. The Vivo has some lags and frame drops for some reason, even during daylight with the main lens. Both phones can also shoot at 120 frames per second, but again the iPhone is smoother and the Vivo video has some focus problems for some reason, making the focus plane change often. For portrait video or cinematic mode, as iPhone calls it, they both do a great job. It does seem Vivo is applying some sort of filter though, and I think probably gears like that more, but you can also argue it is less realistic. Another thing to note about the camera is that the Vivo has a rather big camera bump. It can be used as a resting place for your finger, but it also sometimes makes handling the phone slightly inconvenient. If you look at the display, the Vivo has a punch hole, while iPhone has a dynamic island. The Vivo has a slightly thinner bezels, whereas the iPhone is a slightly larger overall. The screen on both are flat, thanks God. The iPhone has an anti-reflective coating, which is nice, but on the other hand, the Vivo comes with a screen protector pre-installed in the box. The charging speed of the Vivo is 90 watts max, while the iPhone is 40 watts. And also, on Chinese variants that I got, there's a charger in the box. The version I'm using is running OriginOS, and they do promise 4 years of updates. By the way, as a side note, if you want to get the Vivo, I put the link in the description. I got mine from Trading Shenzhen. I've been buying phones from them for 2 years, and they have never ever disappointed me. The OriginOS looks suspiciously similar to iOS, even the camera icon is kind of a copy-paste. If you go to the quick settings, it also has this very similar liquid glass kind of feel to it. The animations are also suspiciously similar. I mean, they're not even trying to hide it at this point. But of course, at the end of the day, OriginOS is Android at its core, whereas the iPhone is running iOS, and they are fundamentally different except for the look and feel. Also, if you do consider buying the Chinese variant of the Vivo, just know that it may not run Android Auto for your car, and you'll also see some random Chinese characters here and there, which you can of course change and delete, but you'll never fully get rid of them. On the other hand, on the Chinese variant of the Vivo, you get a 6500 mAh battery, while on the global one, it is only 5500 mAh, which makes a huge difference. Talking about huge and big things, thanks for 67k subscribers, already a great number. I'm trying to get to 69,000 subscribers, so please give a hand and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I did a battery test on the phones with lots of video and photos, cycling, GPS tracking, YouTube, Google Meet calls, on a mix of Wi-Fi and 5G, and by the end of the test, the Vivo had 46% battery left and the iPhone had 31%, which is insane because the iPhone is already the best battery life phone among conventional flagships. The other thing you may be curious about is how the new Dimensity 9500 processor on the Vivo X300 Pro stacks up against the iPhone A19 Pro and other flagship phones. I actually made a full video about this, which you can watch next. But spoiler alert, the processor is as good as the one on the iPhone. Thanks for tuning in to TechMo, and I will see you in the next one.